Welcome back into Live Now from Fox, and we are taking a live look out there in Des Moines, Iowa. That is where this next story takes us, and we're focusing a little bit more on some of the immigration headlines from earlier this week. And we do know that the superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools was detained by ICE on Friday. I want to put up some of this video here on your screen. Now, this superintendent, Dr. Ian Andre Roberts, said to have moved to the U.S. illegally from Guyana, living in the United States, again, illegally there, but most recently entered the country in 1999 with an F1 student visa to attend St. John's University in Queens, New York. Roberts' employment authorization card reportedly expired back in 2020, and he was ordered to be deported in May 2024 following a weapons possession charge. Dr. Roberts was hired as superintendent for Des Moines Public Schools in 2023 and has been deployed there ever since. So a lot to unpack with the story. To do so, joining us now is going to be immigration attorney Elizabeth Ricci. Elizabeth, good to see you.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
All right. So, I mean, the first question I feel like would have to be this person being a superintendent, that is a really high ranking job. And we're talking about the largest school district in the state of Iowa. How does that happen if he's here illegally?
That's a great question. So there's still not a lot of information about the facts of the case. I did read that he claimed to be a U.S. citizen on his application. So if that's the case, there may be a false claim to citizenship. And if that's what happened and he presented proof of citizenship on his I-9, then the person reviewing that document at Des Moines Public Schools would only have to have deemed it reasonably appearing legitimate. When you do an I-9 form, the person at the place of employment does not have to verify that that document is real or do additional checks unless that employer is E-Verify enrolled, and Iowa is not a mandatory E-Verify enrollment state. So depending on what he provided, it may have seemed legitimate, and then the question would have ended there. But he also did have a work authorization. So that leads me to believe he may have had that because he had a pending deportation case. So there's a lot of unanswered questions still about how this happened, but it certainly shows that I-9 and E-verification are really important, not just to verify employees' identities, but their eligibility to work in this country. And it's a difficult process, and that's bearing true right now in Iowa.
It's just so interesting because you hear these stories and you would think, even if maybe I suppose over in Iowa it's a bit more lax when you hire someone, there is still some sort of, I don't know, electronic verification. You kind of run it through just to, get the facts correct. When we talk about how strict it is, in Iowa, this has kind of run through there with the superintendent was allowed to work there illegally. And this happened back in 2023. So he's been there for quite a minute. How does it compare to other states across the country? And what kind of systems do they use?
Well, states where I live, Florida, E-Verify is required for many employers, for large employers, and for employers that are engaged in government contracts or government agencies. So if this had taken place in Florida, E-Verify would have revealed that he was not eligible to work. And if he presented a work authorization, and again, we don't know what it is that he presented, but if he presented a work authorization in 2023, my guess is that that work authorization was issued to him because he had that pending deportation case that, as we see, came to fruit the next year, and he was ordered deported in 2024. So E-Verify would have been a tool to use to prevent this from happening. But again, E-Verify is not mandatory in Iowa. So whomever reviewed the documentation, as long as it appeared real, did what they were supposed to do under the law that became law, by the way, during President Reagan.
I want to go back to this weapons charge that the superintendent is also facing here. Now, that happened, I believe, back in 2020. When we talk about someone that is in the country, in this case, illegally, at least for what we know within this case, how much more does that complicate his entire case going forward when we look at a charge that happened several years ago, but still pretty serious?
Well, it's my understanding that there's two weapons charges, one from 2020 and one from 2021. So the language in the Second Amendment says the people. It doesn't say citizens. So courts have generally upheld that the Second Amendment rights apply only to U.S. citizens and not the people. So it's certainly possible that one or both of these gun charges is what resulted in him being put in deportation. We don't know. ICE has not yet said what was on that notice to appear for deportation, what his immigration charges were against him. But at this point, I don't believe Dr. Rogers has the ability to overcome this situation. It was a final order of deportation, which means that he either did not appeal or he did appeal and lost that appeal. So he does not have another bite at the apple to remain in the United States, as far as I can tell, based on all of the reports.
Being an immigrant that is in the country here in the US, let's say you do face a charge. It doesn't have to be a weapons charge, but there's a lot of things that someone could get detained for, arrested, and all of that. How would that affect maybe the average person who's trying to gain citizenship here? The assumption would be that if you've immigrated here, you're trying to gain that citizenship status. How does that affect it? Is it something where if you're arrested, I mean, you can pretty much throw that out the window, you're going to get deported?
It depends. So under the Lake and Riley Act, it has changed significantly this year. And even in some cases of being charged without being convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, it requires mandatory detention and you would be put in deportation. So Lake and Riley Act really changes everything.
I want to put up this post here from Homeland Security. This was posted on X. It's really lengthy. I'm not going to read it, but there's the photo of the superintendent. Elizabeth, the next question would be, is the school district going to face any kind of punishment for this? Is there going to be perhaps Department of Homeland Security kind of going down there and inspecting things? I mean, where do they fit in this entire case?
I imagine the district is going to move to E-Verify now. They did not have to be E-Verify enrolled then. They don't now, but this is certainly embarrassing and could have been avoided had they been an E-Verify. Although from what I understand, they did have a criminal background check. They had a consulting firm vet him. It just did not include an immigration check, which obviously had that been done, he would not have been put in this role. So I think that we'll see municipalities, school districts across the country, even if they don't have to be E-Verify enrolled, move toward E-Verify enrollment to avoid this kind of scenario.
And then, Elizabeth, before we move on to another topic, is there anything else that you would like to add about this case? Because, again, it is making the headlines, and I think that a lot of people are baffled that this would even happen in the first place.
Right. So final order of deportation last year should have resulted in a knock on his door or some action to ensure that he departed timely or filed that appeal. And if he did file the appeal and lost the appeal, then a knock on the door. But in May of 2024, we didn't have the multiple billions of dollars of resources toward enforcement that are now available. So I think going forward, we're going to see if someone's ordered removed, there's going to be a follow-up to ensure that that person actually does leave the United States. Because if not, as in cases like this, that person can continue to live in the shadows for many years after being ordered removed.